How would you define the difference between a refugee and a migrant?
Well, I think there are two ways of differentiating between the words refugee and migrant. The first is legally, and clearly a refugee in law is somebody who has been determined to deserve protection in a new state because they have fled their home state due to persecution, usually persecution for political reasons, could be persecution on religious reasons or grounds of ethnicity, for example. So that would be the legal terminology. A migrant is simply a term used to describe anyone who's travelling between one country and another, and a refugee has the more clear legal meaning. However, I think there's a second way to differentiate between the terms, and that is more important in common debate or in general public debate, and that is that we simply use the word migrant in a way to depersonalise people who are fleeing persecution. And I think it is more accurately reflective of the reality of those fleeing persecution and war in Syria, for example, to use the term refugee collectively in describing them. I don't think that conveys a sense that they've been through a legal determination process. I think rather it conveys a sense of empathy with their plight and a sense of recognition of the reality that they are fleeing persecution.
And with media in particular, is there an onus on media organisations to use appropriate terminology?
Yes, I would like to see media organisations adopting a policy of using the term refugee when they're describing those people who are forced to flee their own country, usually at the present time Syria, Afghanistan or Iraq, because of conflict and persecution there.
In alerting public to the plight of these people?
I think the media has played a hugely important role in alerting people in Western Europe, especially in Central Europe, to the plight of the unfortunate people who have fled Syria in so many thousands over the last few months. I think that until we saw photographs, for example, the terribly poignant and tragic photograph of Aylan Kurdi on the beach on the Greek island, I think until we saw those sort of photos, that it was very hard for people to humanise the tragedy that so many thousands of Syrians are suffering. And again, I think we need to look again at language. Migrant is a dehumanising term. When we talk about thousands of migrants, it seems to just convey a sense of lack of sympathy, a lack of empathy with the people who are fleeing persecution. I think the term refugee is a more empathetic term, and it's a term that offers more humanity to the individuals fleeing persecution.
Do you think there should be a set of guidelines for media when covering stories of people displacement?
Yes, I would like to see that. I think it would be fine, for example, to see voluntary guidelines adopted, for example, by our state broadcaster as a policy position to say that we will be referring to people who are fleeing persecution, who are fleeing war and a war zone in Syria or in Iraq or in Afghanistan, to say that those people can be collectively referred to as refugees rather than migrants, that doesn't convey any sense of legal determination or a legal process, but rather it's used as a collective term that conveys a sense of sympathy and a reflection of the reality that they are fleeing conflict and persecution.
The Word is Refugee is an online social media campaign aimed at ensuring appropriate terminology is used by media organisations. Is that something you'd welcome or a campaign you'd support?
I fully support and wholeheartedly endorse the campaign The Word is Refugee. I think it's hugely important that we start collectively calling on the media to adopt the sort of policy we're talking about, that where they're talking about thousands of people who are collectively fleeing persecution and war, that they would use the term refugees to describe those people rather than the much more depersonalising and dehumanising term of migrant. So I fully support the Word is Refugee campaign.